Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. What does it take to lead in a world where trust is broken, identity is digital, and pressure never stops? This week on Extrology, I sit down with Tim Barnett, CEO of Credas, former soldier and serial entrepreneur, for a raw, layered conversation about leadership, reinvention, and the courage to sell vision when the product isn't even built. From walking out of the British Army to launching restaurants and media companies, to scaling a regtech firm used in 40% of UK housing transactions, Tim has rewritten his story more times than most people change careers. We go deep into everything, from spotting burnout hidden behind performance to building belief in boring products, to why emotional buy-in is more important than technical skill. If you've ever felt like an outsider trying to lead, build, or start again, this episode will remind you what it really takes to win at the edge. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Tim Barnett, welcome. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to Extrology. Great to have you here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And without further ado, as they say customarily, let's dive in. So my first question centers really around background, and particularly you've gone from kind of army to TV to tech is how I would describe it. Where did you feel most alive? And where did you feel completely lost?
Whoosh, that's a toughie straight out of the box. Lee, I thought you were going to warm me up. So most of look, I think probably I'm very entrepreneurial by nature. And so the environments where we've been starting something new and requiring that aggressive, the excitement of pushing, working really hard, I just find a Frisian to that frankly, I thrive off, if I'm honest. And quite often when things have grown to a certain point, you sometimes can lose the interest a little bit. And then I always end up circling back and go, right, let's do something new again. So I feel most alive really in the early stages, sort of first 5-6 years when you're growing. So yeah, that's certainly when I feel most alive from a working point of view. Most lost. Loss, I guess, quite a negative word, and it wasn't a negative experience. But I spent a few years working in this kind of a semi-public sector role, really. So the company I worked for, I sat on the board of at the time, was a private company, but 100% of the revenue came from government. So I kind of had like a foot in sort of private sector, public sector, and an amazing place I learned so much about, particularly in and around values and culture, etc. I'm still friends, with a lot of the people there, personal friends of the CEO after I left. But it was probably an environment where I felt I couldn't bring my skills and value to bear. And the pace of it didn't give me the sort of Frisian that I just talked about in my previous answer. So I don't know if I'd say lost, but it's probably the least at home I've been in a job is in that sort of semi-public sector world.
And that entrepreneurial instinct, flair, however you want to describe it, feeling, where does that stem from?
Yeah, I come from an entrepreneurial family. So my mum and dad were entrepreneurs. So they started with small business and grew and ended up being pretty comfortable in the end. So I remember as a child coming from a background where, my dad was a milkman. And then I remember by the time I was a sort of late teenager, they were pretty comfortable in life with houses overseas and stuff like that. So I saw that journey for them. And I understood really from an early age that you need a mixture of attributes in order to succeed in the way that they did and other people I could see in my environment around me as well. And some of those attributes are, things like intelligence, etc. But a lot of them can be things that anyone can do in and around effort and working hard, etc. But you can control the controllables, if that makes sense. And so I saw that quite early and I sort of absorbed that really. And it's been quite an important part of my makeup to bring me where I'm at today is that I won't always be the brightest person in the room. I won't always be the quickest person in the room. I won't always be the most physically stronger in some circumstances, but I can control whether to work earlier than everyone else, and whether I stay later than everyone else, and whether I'm more polite to my peers, and how I comport myself. I can be better than everyone else. Perhaps brighter people might win in some regards, but I can win in other regards. So I just almost top them up what can I control and make sure I win in all of those. And thankfully, I'm pretty, I'm reasonably intelligent and a lot of those natural attributes that, I've got as well. But controlling the controllables really puts you ahead of everyone else.
That's really interesting. It's in particular the information around the inspiration and the lessons that you will have picked up on, even intuitively from your parents, to see that actually you put your mind to it, with the right application, the right drive, the right desire, that you actually can. There's an awful lot you can achieve with that kind of impetus behind you.
Yeah, 100%. If you grow up in an entrepreneurial family environment, almost by osmosis, you're learning lessons around risk, around hard work, around managing people, assets, etc., about taking the knocks and enjoying the good times and somehow working through the bad times. And that's steeped in every meal, in every conversation, in every car journey, etc. So I guess, as a kid growing up, you're almost like a sponge and realise that you're learning all of that. And some of my brothers and sisters, some are entrepreneurial, some aren't. So I guess it lands differently with different individuals. But I really, almost from the start of my career, my first couple of years, I worked for Bang & Olufsen, actually, the luxury brand, which gave me a really, really good grounding. They had a world-leading sales program there. So you spend months and months, and I had a senior sales role there, but you spend months and months going through their program, and they teach you everything around body language, technical sales, psychology of sales, all this sort of stuff, right, to ensure that it can maximize outcomes for their senior people. My role was to sell to high net worth individuals and corporates. And that grounding I got there mapped onto the sort of entrepreneurial stuff's given me a toolbox I still use it every day, 20, 30 years later. And so, yeah, I guess I was lucky, and by osmosis, I picked up a lot of that stuff in the family environment.
And you mentioned there, with my first question, feeling alive around that kind of that initial, that startup phase, if you like, however that might manifest, but nonetheless, that was what really lit the fire. Why? What is it about that kind of environment that gives you that feeling of being so alive?
The problem is, right, every single day you're flirting with like incredible highs. You might win a contract or something goes really well, something clicks into place, you land some funding, whatever that might be, and you're only ever 15 minutes away from an absolute disaster, and something is like almost terminal, and it's exhausting and tiring and stressful, and shortens your life and saps your soul. But the ups and downs, the highs and lows, etc., it just brings an effervescence to life that when you're not in that world. And for example, when I spent a few years, because I thought actually what I wanted is a quieter life. So I deliberately took a different role for a while and go, right, I got offered a board position, very nice, stable, lovely environment. And within a couple of years, I needed that cut and thrust again. I needed to feel alive. I needed the ups and the downs. And what you hope is the ups and downs in a graph go up like this. You might go up 10 points and then back down 9, and then up 10 points and back down 9. So you spend 90% of your time almost going backwards. But over time, the 1% that you go forward all the time accumulate, and you get the compound impact. And hopefully that is what a success graph looks like. But I think it's that constantly flirting with danger and flirting with, highs and lows. That's the bit that sort of I actually realized I enjoy, even when you're in the thick of it. It feels like you're not. When reflecting back and when taking myself out of that, I ended up chasing it again, and I still am now.
Interesting. Picking up on a phrase you mentioned earlier, control the controllables. One of the questions that springs to mind with what you've just described is how perhaps you hold on to that, let's call it the North Star, if you like, when you know that the graph, I mean, it's never a straight line, is it? It's a series of ups and downs to which you refer, probably a few lefts and rights along the way as well. So what is it about you that means that you can retain the focus on that destination, knowing that every day, the journey will deviate, and you've got to stay true to that end game, if you like. How do you do that?
It's a really key point, John, and it matters on a sort of business level as well as a personal level. And so on a personal level, I do quite a lot of talks for young entrepreneurs, etc., trying to sort of advise them and etc. And it's striking, actually. A lot of the young entrepreneurs that I'll meet, guys straight out of university or in entrepreneurial programs, quite often I meet them, it'll be half an hour and we're talking, and they still won't have mentioned what their business idea is. First half an hour is all talking about funding, etc. And it's always the same pattern every single time. I talk to groups on one-on-one, and I always end up saying, look, let's start at the end. What the end of this entrepreneurial journey for you? What does that look like? And virtually hardly ever has anyone defined that. So we go through a conversation. I've had this conversation maybe 100 times, right? And it's always really enlightening. So I say, right, what's the end? What do you want when this finishes? When does it finish? What do you leave with? Is it money? Is it what are you trying to do? Quite often it's money, which is fine. And you say, well, how much? Yeah, what do you want that money for? And the answers are always really illuminating. Some people, I just want to look after my mum and dad. Some people want Ferraris and mega yachts, etc. So whatever that is, there's no right or wrong answer. But once they define then, like, that's what I want, it's quite often money. And then you define how much that is. And you go, why? Why do you need that? Yeah, what's it actually for? Is it for schooling your kids? So every person then will come up with a number. Some are hundreds of millions, some are 2 million, some is, something perhaps more less ambitious. And then once you've got that number, and then I get them to work back and I go, okay, well, to sell a business for you to get that, and we go through and got an equation. Let's say you've got a partner, let's say you've taken on this much debt, this much funding. You then have to pay taxation out of that. You need a multiple on revenue, a multiple on EBITDA. And we walk all the way back to, right, you're going to have to sell your business for £25 million in order for you to get the £3 million that you need. And that £3 million you need for your schooling, for your mum and dad and your house and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And then you've got that number, £25 million, what you need to sell it for. So what revenue do you need to be able to sell for £25 million? On a multiple of 2 or 3x or whatever, you might need a revenue of 10, 15 million pounds. Okay. How do you get from zero today to your 10, 15 million pounds and over what sort of time scale? And literally just walk it all the way back to where people are at now. And what it proves to me every single time is nearly all entrepreneurs start on their journey without actually any idea of what the end looks like. And what journey in life does anyone start without knowing what the destination is? Right. So when you can define the destination, everything suddenly falls into part, because suddenly your revenue targets, your EBITDA targets, your resources, your timelines. People quite often think I want my 3 million quid and I want it in 2 years. And then, there's some really well-established stats that never happens ever, for example. And we can talk through then, how many exits most entrepreneurs have to go through. Seldom does somebody 22, 23 have one idea, sell it 3 years later, walk away with millions, and that's the end of the story. I mean, how many people has anyone met like that? Vanishingly small. So it's nearly always 2 or 3 exits, 4 exits, 5 exits maybe. And when you talk through with people, you realise that the North Star, and you can almost see it sort of landing, that North Star is critical, because from that North Star, everything falls back and you can track it back to day one. So on an individual basis, for any entrepreneur, it's very, very important to understand what that North Star is. Within a company, it's maybe more critical in a way. So we operate within Credas, where I'm at now, what we call high performance culture. So on a foundation of company values, you then build your culture on top of that. And on top of that culture, you can then build a high performance culture. And one of the many key factors that you need for high performance culture is the North Star. That's where we're going. That's where we're at. That's how we're going to get there. And that's every single person in this company's role, and how we iteratively all perform our role, and how that adds into the whole, and how that gets us to the destination. Without that, people are just turning up to work in a vacuum. Yeah, really hard for people to engage, really hard for people to feel an ownership, etc. And particularly if you can define what the reward is when you get to that destination, which is nearly always a bonus, monetary shares, or whatever that might be. But it gives a cohesion. That's how you get an entire team working and pushing in the same direction in a unified way. And when you get that right, the outcomes are incredibly powerful. And that's what we're doing now. We're 40 people in Cardiff, 5th in the app charts, etc. We shouldn't be duking it out and winning against guys in California, but we do because of that high performance culture that we've got. And every single person in the business, doesn't matter what they get paid, where they are in the hierarchy, they can tell you exactly what the North Star is 2 years from now. They can tell you what everyone else's role is in achieving that. And they can tell you certainly what their role is and what they need to be doing this month and the month after and the month after. And so the North Star is critical on a macro and on a micro level for you personally. I've always found that anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's really informative. And I think, to your point, oftentimes, I'm fascinated that your experience of young entrepreneurs is very much around that. Well, because I'd imagine oftentimes they're coming to the table, certainly in conversations I would have had, they're coming to say, I've got this great idea. Yeah. And actually without really understanding, well, what's your why? What's your purpose? What's driving you? What's the outcome you're trying to achieve? Yeah. Ultimately, what's your North Star? And actually, that's quite an uncomfortable conversation, I'd imagine, because I'd imagine there are some that sit there and go, well, I don't know. And how do I know that? So trying to unpick that, that's great that your experience is able to help them to understand the importance of that destination.
But you are right. Most don't know, and you go through the process. And for probably 90% of it, as you go through the process, you can see a dawning realization that this is going to take me 5, 8, 10 years. And that's good, by the way. The sooner people get that reality check, the better. And it's extraordinary throughout enterprise. People don't go through this exercise. And that's why people get overfunded and why people chuck money into things without ever thinking, what's the destination here? Where do we get off? How do we get off? What do we need to achieve to get off? Is that achievable? And so, the North Star, everything comes back from that. I think start the end, work backwards.
Well, let's unpick Credas in a little more detail, if I may. And respectfully, but I think compliance is often perceived as a dry subject.
Yeah.
Albeit, interestingly, we might come on to talk about a fascinating conversation I had on this very podcast around one founder who's developed some anti-money laundering software. And there's the reason we unpicked the reasons why he'd gone down that route when he had a multitude of differing routes he could have gone.
Yeah.
And it was very much driven around the utility nature of how we'd seen people succeed before. It's that kind of must-have. But what's very clear as you talk about Credas, even just we've only touched it with real fire, real passion.
Yeah.
And so what's the mission behind the mechanics?
So it might be worth me telling you how I became involved in the business, because it probably sets the foundation, really. The company was 18 months old when I joined. It had been founded by two guys who were close personal friends, Reese and Kevin. They were both CTOs previously. They had a great idea and they set the business up. The problem is it was burning quite a lot of money, wasn't generating any revenues. It was a brilliant technology solution. But you do need for technology businesses two things. You need the idea and the solution, but it's got to be anchored in commercial reality, if that makes sense. And too many technology companies are really, really good on the tech and pretty useless on the business. If you can harness both of those, which is what we've managed to do at Credas, then you have a really successful business. So the shareholders were funding the business at the time, asked me to come in to, stop burning so much money and maybe turn this great idea and this great PSS technology into a viable business. So that was 5 years ago now. And I'm delighted to say that, the business is extremely successful now. So the business is a really, really great example of a British tech business that's doing really, really well. We're right at the vanguard. I mentioned earlier the App Store. We're 5th in the charts. You've got Teams and Zoom, 1 and 2. LinkedIn is 3. Indeed is 4, and then Credas.
That's some esteemed company you're hovering.
Yeah, and I don't have as much money as those companies to develop mobile apps and stuff. And we're really, really proud of them. And that sort of 5th place in the App Store sort of summarizes so much under the business. And what it summarizes is a small team of 40 people with a unified purpose, a clear objective, high performers, all the levers you need, really punching above its weight. And really, for me, that's where sort of Britain needs to sit in the world as well. Does that make sense? We're never going to have the heft of China, the United States, etc. But we've got great education systems, and we can come up with really smart, beautiful, elegant technology solutions that then can be very, very successful. And so I kind of feel like we're a bit of a poster child, really, for that new tech age of what Britain should be. It's the old equivalent of what we used to do in the garden sheds, making beautiful motor cars, when they shouldn't compete against Ferrari and shouldn't compete against the sort of the big monsters that are all really well funded, but quite often would. And we need to be doing that in technology as well. But we need to do it through smart, high performance cultures, great ideas, well executed. And that's really what we're all about. So what the business does, really simply, is, in life, where you get asked to send in your driving license or your passport or give 3 months utility bills or bank statements. The reason why firms or companies are asking you to do that as an individual is because there'll be legislation that determines they need to run checks on you. And so they'll ask you for that information so they can run their checks, so they can be compliant with legislation. And it's normally quite a horrible sort of experience for everyone. For the firm, they have to ask you for this stuff. They have to chase you for it. It's quite often what you'll send in won't be correct, and they'll have to send it back and ask you to do more stuff. And as a consumer and an individual, it's annoying. And I don't even know where to find utility bills and bank statements nowadays.
And historically, there's a lot of sort of stickiness in that.
Yeah.
A lot of friction in that process,
ages,
isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it slows down transactions. It becomes a barrier to transactions. Somebody asking you to drive into town and walk in somewhere with your passport so they can photocopy it and shove it in a filing cabinet with your bank statements out the back. It's awful for data security, all this sort of stuff. So what our app does is just replace it all. So it allows you can be sitting on a beach anywhere in the world, and you can take a scan the chip in your passport with your phone, and then we'll run all the electronic checks. And within 2-3 seconds, give the company everything that they need to know about you to satisfy their legislative requirements. And for you as a consumer, you're not driving into town and you're not digging down the back of the drawers trying to find an older bank statement, etc. And it costs like a quid or 80p or something like that. So it's cheap. Exactly what technology should be for is take a pain for the consumer, pain for the business, something that's expensive and slow, and replace it with technology that's quick and easy and cheap, and pretty much anyone can use it. And that's what we do. We do it at a pretty big scale now. So about 4.5 to 5 million people a year will go through the platform. And like I say, the international bit of it is really gathering pace. So yeah, that's what the business does. And so the mission of the business really is to take the pain away for companies relating to compliance or running checks on individuals, and take the pain away for consumers as well, and speed up transactions. I'll give you a really, really good example. One of the big use cases for us is buying and selling property. So if you bought or sold a house recently, on average, 5.4 times you'll have to prove your identity. You'll have to do it with the estate agent you're buying a house with. You'll do it again with the estate agent you're selling with. You do it with your conveyancer. You might do it with your IFA, with a broker, with your mortgage provider. All of this, every single time they have to ask you. They then have to chase you if you don't do it within a few days. You then have to provide it, and quite often they have to remediate it or ask you for something. And it just slows down the transaction. It's duplication, it's expensive, it's annoying. And it's like just not a great experience for anyone. And so we replace all of that with tech. And that's really our mission, is to find pain points and then introduce really nice, elegant little solutions that takes that pain away. And if we do that, I tell the team, don't worry about commercials and revenue. That all takes care of itself. Identify what the problems are for customers and consumers, design nice, elegant solutions, take them to market, and all of the commercials will take care of themselves after that. And they do.
So I'm fascinated in the how, if only that, not in terms of the actual mechanics of the Credas offer, but how you've taken a business that was burning cash.
Yeah.
With clearly two visionary founders, but nonetheless, perhaps respectfully, but very, very competent from a tech perspective, but commercializing the offer.
Yeah, I think
to an extent whereby 5 years later you're streamlining a beautifully efficient solution for 5 million people and growing, fifth in the App Store globally with some esteemed company. That wouldn't have been a straight line. The North Star we referred to, high performance culture we referred to, but what have been some of the more significant challenges that you've had to face and overcome along the way?
It's a process, Lee, right? So it was when I came in and took over the business, and the two founders, like I say, I play golf for them most weeks, but they're no longer in the business and haven't been for some time. So when I took over, the first thing I wanted to do, born of previous experience with other businesses I've set up and grown, is I knew straight away that what I needed to do is establish the foundations based on really clear, agreed company values. Right, that's the absolute building block of any successful business. In my experience anyway, and of the ones that I've run. So, and the mechanical process of doing that. So we had external shareholders who the staff had never met ever. They're based down in London. We were in Cardiff. They were from a different world. So I dragged all of those up to Cardiff, 6 high net worth individuals, took all of my team to a hotel, I had a big room. And on every table, I put one shareholder, I put a manager, I put somebody in an entry level role, etc. So there's a mix on every single table. And then every single table had to stand up in turn and talk through the values that were important to them as individuals. And I wasn't involved in it. I sat on the keyboard and we had a huge screen and I had like a big grid. So for every table, the values that are important to them, we put into this grid. But really, really critically, they weren't allowed just to give a word, truth, honesty, respect. There's only 12 words company values can be. It's all about what's behind that. So they had to give working examples of, if you say honesty, what does that mean in a practical sense in terms of your job? So we might have somebody in accounts stand up and go, well, a value for me is honesty. And what I mean by that is if we've been late paying a bill, for example, don't pay our bills late, please, as an example. If we're late paying a bill, rather than say the check's in the post or we missed it or I don't know what's happened, we just tell them, I'm very, very sorry, we screwed up here, we missed it. I'll get it sorted out by tomorrow. So it had to be an example as to what it meant. Somebody in HR might stand up and might use the same word, honesty, But their example might be if we're exiting somebody from the business, for example, due to non-performance, rather than be nice about it and make up some other, it's us, not you, etc. We just really professionally tell them exactly where the problem is and what mitigating things, actions we took, and then why that decision had been made. So honesty for that person in HR meant something slightly different to the person in finance, but ultimately it's still the same point. Right? So we went around all the tables, and the values that are important to everyone in that room, no matter what their position in the pyramid, whether they're worth hundreds of millions of pounds or whether they're being paid 25 grand a year, had equal weighting and went up on the grid. And off that grid on the screen fell out what was important to all of us in the business. So we condensed it down, and that became our company values, right? And synonymized by the usual words of positivity, trust, honesty, transparency, all this sort of stuff. Once we had those values defined as a group, that's where most companies stop, actually. And what they do is print it on a poster and stick it on the wall, maybe bung it on the website, and box ticked.
Here's our values.
On we go,
yeah.
But that's not what it is for me. That's not setting a foundation stone on which you can build. So we take those values and then we punch it. And I made sure we punched it into the actual DNA of the business. And there's practical ways that I did that. So every single one-to-one for every member of staff, every single month, the first item on that form is company values. So the individual and their manager talk through, do they believe the company's living up to the values? Do they believe I am as a CEO? Do they believe the executive is? Do they believe their manager is? Does the manager believe the individual is? Teams. So call out really good examples of company values and colleagues and good decisions and on occasion bad ones as well. So that all gets fed up. Every SMT meeting, the first item on the agenda is company values. Every exec meeting, the first item on the agenda is company values. Every board meeting, the first item on the agenda is company values. So you can now start embedding it into the business as a constant conversation for every single person in the business, wherever they are in the hierarchy. And then over time, I could start seeing decisions being made on company values. And now, we're 5 years later, there's a sign there. So, we screw up all the time, like every business does.
Every business, absolutely.
We live in the real world, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll be debating. I don't know, again, I'll make up an example. Let's say we've got a customer and they bill 100 grand a month. We've annoyed them a couple of times this month and we've just got their bill and it's 15 quid out. And maybe the conversation is, oh God, like if I phone them and tell them we've done another thing wrong, they're going to be really annoyed. They're not going to notice 15 quid. And there'll be a little debate. And then somebody will and we have this invisible sign where somebody will point at the wall, at an invisible poster on the wall. And what they're saying is values. And suddenly the debate's over. It's very, very clear. And suddenly it's like, who's going to pick up the phone? I'll do it. Right. And now difficult decisions in the business, dozens, if not hundreds of times a day, are based on those values. And they're nearly always the right decision. Sometimes embarrassing, sometimes expensive, sometimes, but it's always the right decision. And that's one of my proudest achievements so far, is instilling that foundation and bedrock of those clear values, right? And everyone lives to them. And on occasion, people come into the business and they're not aligned to those values, and then they don't stay in the business because it's critical. Like part of my role is to be a guardian of those values. On top of that foundation, then you build culture. And our culture is one that, I do call a high performance culture. And there are certain traits that I've noticed over the years that you find in high performance environments. So I've had some military experience, I play sport at a decent level. And those traits I've put into the business. So fear of failure, I took that away from the staff. We were a small business at the time, aggressively growing a startup. In that culture, people have got to be allowed to try stuff, and they've got to be able to screw up. I screw up all the time. So to remove that fear of failure, for the first few months, I just constantly apologise to the staff. I put stuff out in Slack, on Teams. Every now and again, I go into the office if we had a company meeting, and I actually made up stuff that I hadn't done. Made up problems. Sorry, guys, and apologise for stuff that never even happened. And I did it to just start showing everyone that I screw up all the time, and you apologise for it. Sorry, guys, if I made your life harder. I did this, and this is why I won't do it again. It might not have even existed. And then over a few months, suddenly the first knock on my door, just to let you know, I screwed up here, and I've changed the process, so it won't happen again. And then another knock, and then there's 2 knocks a day and 4 knocks a day, and now, like I say, within probably 8 to 9, 10 months, people are almost proud to come and tell you how they've screwed up because they understand that I like it. I like that honesty. And there's absolutely now nothing gets swept under the carpet. If anyone screws up, there's no screaming, shouting. They immediately go, we did a release. It's not gone right. We've got a couple of bugs in it. We've pulled it back. We're fixing it tonight. And we've changed the process for testing next time so it doesn't happen. Whereas maybe previously, or in cultures where you don't have that honesty, that'll be just quickly fixed without anyone knowing and slightly swept under the carpet. So that sort of fear of failure for me is one of the key tenets of a high performance environment.
And it takes great courage to elicit that fear of, to make it okay to fail. I think from your own perspective, that courage to stand up and say, yeah, me too, right? So we're all, I get this wrong.
It has to start there.
Yeah, it has to start from the top, which is perhaps a bit of an indictment, given oftentimes the news cycle as we find ourselves here today, that courage to admit when you might be getting something wrong would appear to be sadly lacking in much of our high-profile leadership.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what I would say is that I've probably changed over the years as well. Maybe when I was younger and in my first businesses, maybe I did think I knew everything, and maybe I wouldn't admit my own failures, certainly in front of my team. Maybe I felt I needed to be the person in the room who knew everything. Yeah. And you mature, don't you? And, as you get older, you mature personally and your experience grows and you realize that that's not necessarily the best path to the best outcomes. And so, I think culturally, as you look wider in the world and, look at the news that's going on this week and stuff, maybe leaders in all sorts of positions would benefit from saying, that didn't work. We won't do that again. We're going to do something different. And you know what? I think people would vote for that.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's as much as to your leadership style. And I was interested to understand if perhaps there was a leadership lesson taken from your military experience that maybe didn't work in business and perhaps even might have cost you.
Yeah. Well, like I say, it's not been a smooth line. I mean, certainly earlier in my career, from both a personality point of view and perhaps lacking the experience, you always feel like you need to be the boss, and probably overly so, if that makes sense, particularly if you're quite young. If you're a young entrepreneur, nearly always the people you employ are older than you, more gnarled, particularly if you've got sales guys. I remember being 22 in my first tech business that I founded, and most of the sales guys there were in their 40s, sort of, some of them in their 50s, my age now, run rings around me. So the only way I felt I could control that was by being a really disciplinarian, tough boss. And in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best way to do it, if I'm honest. And it's certainly not the way I do it now. We got the outcomes we wanted, but it was quite adversarial. It was a tough road. It's a battle to get there. So I think as leaders, you mature and stuff over time and you learn, don't you? The problem is that, it could be borderline psychopathic, right? But you've got to look at what's the best way to get to the outcome. Outcomes. That's all that matters, right? And again, if you work back from the outcomes, as you get older, you realize the best way of doing it is, for example, remove the fear of failure. Well, how do I get that outcome from the business? Well, the best way as a leader is to show everyone else I'm not afraid of failing, and I do it all the time. And when I fail, I hold my hand up, and then I'll do it differently next time to make sure that that's not repeated. That's the outcome you want for the entire team, isn't it? So as a leader, demonstrate that yourself. And in a leadership position, and I forget this sometimes, I still do, you forget that eyes are on you all the time. People watch you all the time. I don't feel like people should be watching me. I don't feel like I'm a great example of anything, but I increasingly understand that I am, because the job title I've got. So your behaviors matter and people ape them. Not all the time, but quite often people ape them. And so if you show them good examples and people ape that, then what you have is, the growth of a good culture in the business. So the fear of failure is one of the key elements of a high performance culture in my experience. Another one would be what we touched on earlier, is a clear objective, clear business objective for everyone. That's where we're going. That's where we're at. That's how we get there. Follow me, sort of thing. And that's your role that you play in. And everyone's very clear what their role is and what their deliverables are. So I think the fear of failure, the clear objectives for everyone. The other tenant, I would say, is having a culture of challenge. I'm not sure you can have a high performance culture without the ability for everyone to challenge all the time. Right? Because it's only through challenge and debate and sometimes, argument that, again, you get the best outcome. if nobody challenges me, then the business will just be a reflection of me, both my good and bad points, isn't it? What you want, if you've got 40, 50 people in an organization, you want the business to be a reflection, the decisions to be a reflection of all the good stuff, of 50 good bits. Does that make sense? That'll give you the best.
Certainly does.
Not just one guy's one good bit and is bad. So I think a culture challenge is really important. And alongside that goes accountability. I'm accountable to the staff. I share the P&L every single month. I share the business objectives. Everyone understands what my remuneration and bonus packages, etc., and everyone else's. And I do take accountability when things go wrong. It's important that you do. And again, I expect that everyone else in the business to do the same. And all of these sort of things. And I can mirror that in both the military and sport, right? That accountability thing is that within sports, if somebody misses a tackle and concedes a try or 5 tries in a match or 3 goals in a football match, the coach has to be able to go to that individual and say, look, you've got a problem with your tackle technique, right? I'm going to invest more time and to train you to address that, right? Because we're not getting the outcomes we need because you just leaked 5 goals, right? And he needs to be able to do that without fear of somebody going, oh, I'm being picked on, I'm being bullied, etc. The relationship and the culture has to be there. The coach can do and have that difficult conversation. And from the player's point of view, they've got to operate and have a mentality where if the coach comes along and says, look, we've leaked 5 goals because of your deficiency in this area and we'll invest in you to make sure that we plug that gap. That individual has to be mature enough to go, yeah, I can see that. And thank you for investing in me and I'll improve. And that's a good outcome, isn't it, for everyone? And that individual can't be sitting there going, I'm being bullied or I'm being picked on, I'm being ostracized, right? All that negative stuff. If you get rid of all that negative stuff, what you have is really good, honest conversations and outcomes, the best outcomes. And that is absolutely critical, right? And all of these dovetail together. You can't really get that without the ability to challenge, without openness, without the fear of failure. And the other sort of example of that from my military days, which I saw, is that if you're going out as a unit, one person in that unit, the radio operator hasn't packed a spare battery, the platoon commander's got to have the ability to address him about that and challenge him about that because people might die. The machine gun hasn't kept the machine gun clean, for example, or packed enough ammo like you should do. There's got to be a relationship where the manager, the leader, can tackle that behavior, identify it, tackle it, put in remediating actions, and the individual has to accept that and address those things. You can't have too much. I see it a lot, particularly in business, where those conversations can't happen for whatever reason, right? The culture doesn't exist, the relationships don't exist, the leadership doesn't exist, where those conversations can't happen or don't happen or do happen and end up in a really negative place. And what do you not get from that? You don't get the outcome. You don't get the outcomes. It's always outcome focused.
How do you spot, given that you've high performance culture, you've got the metrics that you might apply to evidence the success that you enjoy are very much on track. The business is performing well. I guess the thing that intrigues me is how you spot quiet burnout in a team that looks like it's performing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I said every item in every one-to-one is values and every meeting agenda. The second one is well-being.
Yeah,
it's really important because if you ask a lot of your team, which I do, that comes with, at times, a really hefty workload, sometimes longer hours. For the last month, we've had a problem with our database and it's popped out a couple of times and maxed out and creates an outage for customers. It's like really, really bad news. In 7 years, this is the first real sort of technical glitch that we've had. We've always been the good, stable guys, and suddenly we're the guys who are causing disruption for customers. And I've had to lean on the team a lot. I really put a lot of pressure on those guys. They've been working late. We put a team of 9 together and they had to work the problem. It took 3 weeks, right? A lot of hours, early starts, a lot of stress, etc. You can only lean on your team like that occasionally. If you put that pressure on your team all the time, it's not good leadership and you won't get the outcomes that you need. But I was able to lean on the team because the rest of the time we don't treat them in a way that is abusive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We treat the team really, really well. We pay really well. We have nice reward systems. We're a nice, progressive environment to live in. And what that showed to me as well, and be too self-congratulatory about this as well, but the team were willing to run through walls for that 3 weeks. To guys put holidays aside, guys had days off. They 4 o'clock in the morning, work until midnight, etc. for 3 weeks. But they did that for for the business and for the leadership of the business. Not necessarily me, I'm part of a leadership team, but they were willing to get into the trenches for that 3 weeks. We had to ask them to do it. We got in with them, right? We all shared that pain, but they were willing to do it. And that told me a lot about the business and where we've come in the last 5 years and why it's critical to our success, because in many circumstances, people won't give up their holidays. People won't speak to their wife and go, I can't come to sports day, parents' evening. I got this problem with the database at the minute. And those are the sort of conversations that are happening. So you almost need to put the credit in the bank. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you take those guys to the well when you don't need to, when you need to actually go into the well and there's nothing there, if that makes sense. There's another key lever as well, and that's the impact of high performers. Really, really interesting, right? Within any team, you need a smattering of high performers, ideally 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. And what they do is they raise the level of absolutely everyone around them. Right? All my metaphors go back to sport or the military or war, sport or war, rugby or war, they always do. And there's a really, really great example in the 2012 Olympics in London, the 800 meter race. The winning time there was a new world record. But the performer, I forget the guy's name, David Radeshi, or he's an Ethiopian, I believe. But he pulled along everyone so that every single person in that race broke a record. It was either their personal best, it was either their national record, etc. And it turned out that the guy in 8th place would have won the gold in any other previous Olympics. And that is the impact that a high performer can have within a team. There's really good data showing when Usain Bolt used to run the 100 meters, all the competitors around him, all of their times would be elevated compared to races where he wasn't in. And that's the impact of high performers. So we've been really, really, not even in the team can be a mad high performer, but we've been really, really fastidious about ensuring 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people is a real high flyer. And you have to recruit people like that. You have to have the right culture to attract them in. You have to pay the right money. And that's probably the final key lever amongst all the others that I've mentioned. And all of that as an amalgam create that bedrock of values, your culture, and then your high performance culture on top.
Complete this sentence for me. Leadership without what is worthless?
Trust, I think. Interestingly, Credas is the Latin word for trust. So I'm very on brand with my answer there. But I think if your team don't trust you, I worked in environments where I didn't trust the boss and didn't trust the leadership. I didn't trust the company. Lots of people listening to this will recognize that. And seldom are they high performance environments and seldom are they high performing companies when you have that, when you have a disconnect between management, leadership, and the rest of the team. So if your team trusts you that you've got their interests at heart and it's not just words, that you follow it through. So when we sold the business in November 23, so I took the business to market. We were going to sell to private equity. As it happened, we sold to a big North American tech giant, but we gave 10% of the business to the staff. And that was part of the North Star. I said earlier, if you got your North Star on your reward, we always told them when we sell, because we're always going to sell, is that you guys will have 10% of the business. To put that into context, loads of our staff had 6-figure payouts, paid off their mortgages, paid off their debts, put their kids through weddings and stuff like this. We had a party that night when everyone got their check. It was the best party you've ever been to in your life. But really, really, again, one of the proudest things I've been involved with, because we always said we would do it. We always promised we would do it. And there's loads of opportunities for us not to do that, to backtrack. And we followed through on it. And after that, I expected loads of staff to leave. It was the end of an era. We sold to a big company. I was always going to stay on. But I really, really interestingly, we had 0 churn and nearly all the staff are still there now. That was nearly 18 months ago. We had a couple leave in the meantime, but immediately afterwards. So they all took the checks and still stayed working in the business and still are. And I think all of that is probably because they trust me and my leadership team that we'll deliver and we do actually have their interests at heart. It's not just the poster on the wall that we talked about earlier. You've got to live it.
So Extrology has a real focus on people, performance and purpose. Which one are you living in most right now and why?
People, performance and purpose. Oh, do you have to choose one? I don't want to give an easy answer, but they're so intertwined, aren't they? I'm not sure you can have any of those without the others being present. People are critical by far the biggest asset in the business. Our first employee, Leah, is still in the business now. And her face, actually, if you ever go through the Credas process, her face is the one that guides you through it on the wizard. And so there are millions and millions and millions of people in the UK. So, I mean, if we're dealing with 4 or 5 million people a year, we can go 7 years now. So most adults in the UK will have the Credas app or will have had pictures of Leah's face on their phones. And, you know, she lives in Ystrad and takes her kid to primary school every morning. And, but she's still in the business today. And then her husband came to work for us. Her sister works for us. My 2 sons work for us. So we're right at the cutting edge of technology. And in our field, I would say our technology is right at the front of that. I don't see anyone else who's got the same capability that we do have in our platforms, a key part of why we have customers like Deloitte and PwC, etc. But when you actually turn up at the office in Cardiff, it's almost like an old-fashioned environment where you've got a lot of family members working there. People are nice. You've got the culture that we've just spent the last 20 odd minutes talking about. And I think if you can get these balances correct between good people behaving in good ways, right? We've never lost a reseller. Half our money comes through resellers. So people who take up our technology and white label it and then resell it on. Resellers are notoriously difficult to keep hold of, particularly if you do have a direct channel as well, because they're always paranoid that you're nicking their customers, etc. And in 7 years, we've never lost a single reseller. And the reason and how we manage that entire channel is absolutely through relationships and trust and honesty. My resellers know that I won't give another reseller preferential treatment, preferential pricing. They'll know that when their customers come to us, they come direct to get a cheaper deal, that we'll always send them back, etc. And so good people behaving in good ways are a really, really critical part. And you can do it just because it's nice to do, and it is nice to do. But even if you're not that nice a person and don't value that stuff, you should do it anyway, because there's a really good business reason to do this stuff. Generally, keep the knowledge in the business of the people. You cut down on your staff churn, cut down on your recruitment costs, which is probably bad news for guys like yourself. So people are critical. The purpose we touched about earlier, you've got to have the North Star and understands why you're here. And performance. I mean, we've talked a lot, haven't we, about high-performance culture. So sorry, I'm not going to pick one. I think they're all intertwined, Lee.
It's your prerogative, absolutely, as the guest. And I mean, several times you've mentioned Cardiff and Wales. And I think in a world that's obsessed with kind of Silicon Valley scale, if I can put it in those terms, why stay rooted in Wales?
Yeah, look, we're very proud of our Welsh culture.
It really comes across.
Yeah, I talk to the team a lot about this, though. It's very, very important that it doesn't become the only thing interesting about the company. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm quite plugged into the local sort of scene and landscape and environment in South Wales, particularly the fintech ones. I sit on the advisory board for Fintech Wales, etc. We've got a lot of big fintech businesses there. People like Admiral, based out of there, Go Compare the Market, all of these sort of guys. A lot of the banks as well, Monzo, Starling, all based in Cardiff. So there's a really thriving fintech scene. But particularly for smaller businesses like ours, though, quite often people lean on the flag a lot. And being a Welsh business becomes literally the most important thing for that business. And I've never wanted that for Credas. We have global ambitions. Yeah. I have vaulting ambitions for the business. So I stayed at this one longer past that first 5 years when I said quite often you reach a size and then I get a bit itchy feet and want to start something new. I don't feel like that with Credas because I feel like we're still really at the start of the journey. Every week we get a new opportunity in the pipeline. So the internationalization bit of it now, in effect, just started 9 different businesses in 9 different countries. And each one of those will have its own journey to come over the next few years. And so we're proud of the culture and we're proud of the heritage and we're very rooted in South Wales. But, you know, we're a technology business that's used globally and we have global clients and we're increasingly putting roots down in other countries. And so getting that balance right is important. I'm a proud Welshman, but also I cringe sometimes every time the Six Nations comes around. And the adverts will be, you know, castles and fire and sort of choirs and this sort of plastic version of Wales that hasn't existed for about 40 years. And so you have to be careful about sort of leaning on too much into it.
It's an interesting insight into that, into the whole issue of emotional buy-in, if you like. And one of the questions I had was how do you create emotional buy-in around a product that no one talks about at a dinner party, if you like, which is incredible as to the success that you enjoy as a consequence, but it's not, it's not tip of the tongue, I'd imagine, respectfully.
Yeah, it's not Candy Crush, is it?
No. So how do you create that sort of emotional buy-in in that sort of scenario?
Yeah, and it depends on the sort of the parties that you're talking about. So for staff, it's easy because they live and work it every day, right? They genuinely care. And I know everyone will say this, right? But like when we had these outages in the last month or so, the staff are gutted about it. And the relationships they have with customers, because we have virtually 0.4% of our revenue will churn in a year. So if we lose customers, they tend to be at the really low end of the value scale, which churn anyway. We just don't lose big customers ever. And a large part of that is, number one, the tech, and the service.
Yeah.
But a large part of it is a lot of my guys have been with the business from the start. A lot of those relationships with customers are years old now. And that word trust is there. We're a compliance company and we keep directors out of prison, out of jails. So people have to trust us. And if things aren't working properly, they trust us to go, hang on, we've got a problem with this. And so the buy-in from staff is easy because they live it, right? The buy-in from customers, most people in a firm won't care, but the people who make the decisions around us, like the compliance guys, like the technology guys, etc., they like our business. We're easy to deal with. Our commercials are nice and simple. Our integration is really simple. It's one of the great things that Kevin Reese built was an API integration that you can integrate us in. People have done it in a day. Really big, complex integrations, really, really nice and simple. Our platform is just intuitive and simple. It's increasingly getting. We're moving away from that a little bit as we're trying to be more and more flexible. But we're always trying to drag it back to make it delightful to use. And it goes back to that point that we solve pain for customers. Mm-hmm. And occasionally, if we do lose the odd customer and they'll try someone else, very, very often we find that they come back because it's a grudge activity. People don't want to be doing this. It's getting away in the transaction. But at least they realize that we help that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if you experience something else or the platform doesn't work or it's very expensive, hidden charges, the integration's horrible, you phone up support and you don't get to speak to one of Leah in the team and you don't know them by name, etc. It's a different experience. And that's why we have a really loyal customer base. It's all of the amalgam of everything we've talked about actually during this conversation. And customers see it. They know that we give big chunks of the business to the staff, and they know that the staff have stayed after us and stuff. So as much as you can get people to love compliance solutions, we seem to be doing that with our customers, and we certainly have it with the staff.
What scares you most about where digital identity is heading and what gives you hope?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting time actually for this sector. And there's a lot of debate around digital identity. And a lot of concern, particularly in the UK, because we've never had a culture where we have ID documents. Outside of times of war, we don't have national ID cards. We don't require citizens to carry IDs, whereas that's much more accepted in other countries, even in Europe, and particularly places like China, etc. So any talk about digital identities is almost a bit of a trigger for us as a society. But the fact is that to access services nowadays, increasingly, you do need to be able to prove your identity, and taking your passport or driving license into a branch, or even using our solution, which is the next best thing. You can do it sat on a sofa, but it's still not the best solution. Because what we do is we take an analog document like a passport or driving license and in effect use our tech to turn it into a digital ID. Even that's probably got a shelf life, if I'm honest, because it makes sense for your ID to be digital in the first place and held one place so people can check it. So you don't have to do it over and over and over again. You don't have to pay people like me over and over again. So I think from a consumer, the digital identity landscape will move over the next few years. So it will be a completely, we'll end up with a completely digital version of our passport and a completely digital version of our driving license, and a completely digital ID that lots of people can access. So I think that's where we'll end up going. But the government have got a big role to play in that and making sure that people understand the benefits of that and that it's not necessarily a surveillance tool. And we go all the way back to that word trust again. Right? And that's got to be the underpinning of that. That for us introduces opportunity and potential risk as well. The opportunity being that whoever you are in society, and it's really important, I'm quite passionate about this as a technologist, is around the issues of digital exclusion, right? Society, because we're dealing now with, like I say, millions of people a year, society is made up of all sorts of people, all sorts of educational backgrounds, maybe come from overseas and English isn't their first language. My Auntie Rosie, she can't be excluded from opening a bank account because she's not great on an iPhone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We've got to pick these, got to take these things into account as a society, that we don't leave bits behind in our sort of search for the efficiency of a digital future. And so what I'm hoping it'll do is it'll allow people to still use physical documents if they wish. I don't think we want to get rid of that for a long time. Still allow people to turn up into a branch if they wish. My Auntie Rosie will go to a local branch in town. She does the way she's always worked. Does that make sense? So we still want to leave that there for people, but also for those people who are happy to have a digital identity issued by the government or issued by somebody like Credas, but it's got a government kite mark on, so they know anyone knows it can be trusted. Allow people to enjoy the efficiencies and the speed of access and services through that route as well. And so if that's where the government are going, I think that's a very good thing for everyone, good for our business, but also good for society. If we end up with a pure government issue ID, that is a concern for us as a business, because suddenly that takes that part of our business away from us. But even as a citizen, I think probably that doesn't feel aligned to British culture, if I'm honest. A single ID document, you have to rely on government, and the government then know that you're using that to access gambling, to when you're buying or selling a house, to access your pornography, to access buying alcohol. I'm not sure as a society we're happy with that, if that makes sense. So I think that's the risk.
What do you want Credas to stand for beyond tech and transactions?
So as a business, you have a social responsibility as well. And not all companies feel that they do, or lots of companies say that they do, but don't necessarily, again, bang out a poster, bang out on the website and tick that's done. We engage and we try and we find the sort of biggest bang for our buck we can get is engaging locally. So, for example, we engage with a couple of primary schools and we sponsor them. Don't make a huge fuss about it. Don't post it everywhere because, you can do nice things without necessarily banging it on Twitter. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Don't only do the right things, there's a camera present. So our staff every quarter go into these schools and they get, every year the school gets a big box of resources. There's lesson plans that we buy from an educational provider. So there's books, lesson plans, video, all this sort of stuff, right? Big chunk of resources. And then every quarter someone from our business will go into the schools and spend half a day there and hang out with the kids, maybe do some lessons. We try and do it around entrepreneurship, but like dumbed down for kids, obviously, to talk about money, and does that make sense? So we do that quite quietly under the radar to try and ensure that we're supporting local schools. We're involved in a program with a number of prisons across South Wales as well to provide training and potential employment opportunities, not necessarily within our own business, but to effectively help equip people with the skills that come out to try and bring down reoffending. Again, not something that we particularly bang on our websites. It's just something that several people in the business are passionate about, and we have really good outcomes on that. And we're engaging in a number of programs in that regard. And the other thing that we do is with secondary schools locally, particularly in and around sixth formers, we do a lot of stuff where they can come in and do day placements, etc. And we do workshops, and they get to sit in with each team for a couple of hours around the business. And my guys are so good; they love it when that happens because they can sit down, show people their jobs, they give them exercises and quizzes, and we make it quite fun. And we engage with Lawrence Delalio's charity that does a lot of work in that space with excluded kids, and we bring them in. Quite often what they do is they try and take them to workplaces to say, look, behave yourself and don't get, and here, for example, you've got to work in life. And the two places they were taking them to previously, one was a garage and one was a sausage factory. And I was like, bring them to my tech company, give them something a bit more aspirational. And, if you behave, you could be stuffing sausages for the rest of your life. So they come in and we've got a nice environment. We're in an old brewery, it's all brick and glass and beanbags everywhere. And kids turn up for work on skateboards, and we're a typical tech company in that regard. But we engage a lot with our community to try and do stuff reasonably under the radar and support. And I think as a business, you've got a responsibility to do it. I know actually we've got a really good reputation in South Wales for doing things like that. Good people doing good things, like I said earlier. And I like that we are known for it.
I wonder if I may just tap into your own kind of founder experience, if you like, in your own entrepreneurial journey. What's the thing that fascinates me is the difference between selling what exists and selling what you believe can exist. How do you do that?
The biggest example of doing that is selling to investors what you're going to do in the future. Give me an awful lot of money today and I'll deliver something in the future. I mean, it's the ultimate sales job, really. And so when we were selling Credas, we were going through the usual road up and down to London for for months on end doing pitches to private equity. We got a lot of offers, which was great. It was exhausting, but effectively what you're doing is selling something that doesn't exist, something that I'm very confident I can deliver in the future. But give me tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds today. So I think it's the ultimate sales job, really. And again, though, how you're successful with that, I think is fairly straightforward. People can overcomplicate things. First thing people do is look at your background. Can we trust this guy? That word again, trust. Can we trust this guy based on what he's achieved previously? That's the first thing people look at. They look at the business you've got now, right? Can we trust this business has the opportunity to grow like he says it does, based on its previous performance and its trajectory and its tech capability and its team and its people? And then do we trust the market, etc., is what he says it will be, and that him and his team can execute it? And if you can tick off all of these things and give a really, really good, erudite, empirically based argument, not just I'm very passionate. I watch Dragon Dens a lot, right? The word passionate, whenever it comes up, I always cringe slightly. It's like a stick in plaster where you don't have data or you don't have a good answer. But I'm very passionate about stuff. It means nothing really. You need to get away from passion and put it into actual deliverables. And again, go all the way back to what we talked about earlier. There's a North Star. You just put the North Star out for the next 5 years to investors, because that's where we're going. That's where we're at today. That's exactly how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to deliver in each month. This is what each member of the team needs to do to deliver this stuff. And this is what we've been doing for the last 5 or 7 years. And so that's how I found you can sell what doesn't exist to people, is you've got to base it on empirical evidence, and they've got to trust, and they trust you based on what you've done in the past.
So what does the future look like for you, Tim?
For me or for Credas?
For both.
Yeah. For the business, I'll start off with that. It's really exciting, if I'm honest. So I've touched it a couple of times on our internationalization, which is really motoring now, which is great. We're growing still hugely in the UK. The bit that really excites me is that digital adoption for compliance processes is still in its infancy. If you look at law firms, like 70% of law firms are still doing this manually by photocopying passports and using email, etc. So there's a huge amount of runway still to go. 52% of all residential property transactions will use our technology. There's still 48% who are either using competitors or doing it manually. And you've got financial services and so many other walks of life where pen and paper ain't making a comeback. We need to, and nor is legislation. Now, every year, people create new laws. They're not getting rid of laws, right? So the legislative requirements are growing. The opportunities for fraud are growing, particularly with AI. And we see a lot of that every day now. We stop AI-generated fraud documents, which are getting better and better, more and more sophisticated every single day. So the requirements are growing all the time. And still, we're in the infancy of adoption. And we've done a huge amount of growth already. So that's really exciting for the UK. And then for many of the countries that we're internationalizing into, they're probably a few years behind. So they've still got this adoption curve still to go. And because we've got, in my view, and in fact, in the view of most of our big customers and the people who bought us the best technology solution in the market, we're really, really primed. When you map on then the team, the culture, the values, the leadership, the clarity, etc., we're in an absolutely fantastic spot. So the business is in rude health, and I'm enjoying riding that wave. And that's why I'm not bailing out now, because it still feels to me like we're in the infancy, really, of what the business can achieve. So that's all great. For me personally, I love going to work in the morning. I still go in 5 days. I live 25 minutes away, just outside the city. And that 25 minutes when I drive in, I bookend the day with my commute. And that 25 minutes, I get my head in order. What do I want to achieve from today? And I get into work and I'm ready to go. And at the end of the day, I put a podcast on. Yours obviously is the first one on speed. I put a podcast on, put some music on, then you can decompress. So when you arrive home, you're a Dan again, if that makes sense. And I enjoy that, and I want to carry on doing it. I feel like I've done a good job so far. People around me appear to feel the same. So I want to be part of executing the next 2-3 years to really sort of make Credas be all it can be, and I do think it will be one of the foremost global platforms for compliance over the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, congratulations on a wonderful journey and the success that you've enjoyed to date, because I appreciate that doesn't come by accident. There's an awful lot of blood, sweat and tears that will have gone into that, which a lot of which you've been very kind to share with us today. I think it's a wonderful story, and I look forward to seeing you continue to thrive. You're a great example for the UK tech entrepreneurial environment and just what can be achieved. And I don't know if it's a uniquely British trait, but I don't think we shout particularly loud often enough about the kind of success stories that are here.
Yeah,
I think in reality, we're very quick to do ourselves down. We live on a very small island that punches way above its weight, in terms of its impact on the globe. And I think there's an awful lot for which we could be hugely proud. We should be hugely proud of which Credas is clearly front and center from a tech perspective leading the charge. So really appreciate you sharing the journey with us today. It's been really insightful, and I wish you continued success. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, and thanks for the invite. I've enjoyed it.
Brilliant.
If this conversation resonated, do us and someone else a favour. Drop us a review wherever you're listening. It helps Extrology reach the people who need to hear these kind of conversations most. Make sure you follow the show, subscribe on YouTube, and if you want to go deeper on the themes from today, identity, resilience and reinvention, head to our Substack, where we break it all down and give you the tools to apply it in your own life. And if you're serious about building a career that actually matters, one built on more than just titles and trajectory, check out The Career Edge. It's our premium content for leaders, creatives and high performers who want clarity, leverage and long-term edge. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep chasing performance with purpose. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.